first one that I want to talk about is Rock Hudson, because I knew the name and I'd seen some films, but really didn't know an awful lot about him. And watching this show, initially I thought, oh, it's pretty cool to see him and what he might have been like. But in reality, Rock Hudson wasn't even popular in the 40s. He wasn't actually popular until the 50s. So what we're seeing wasn't anything like what he really was. Yes, he was awkward. Yes, he was nervous and probably didn't do as well to start off with, but there was no way he needed, I don't know what it was, like 100 takes of his audition. That was not the case with him. But what was really cool, I loved the fact that with his gay storyline, they did the whole thing where they came out in front of everyone, where in reality it was actually the 80s before Rock Hudson came out, and it was only because he was dying of AIDS that he even came out. So that never happened. You know, he never was an openly gay actor during that time. So I kind of love that it was something that they put in that wasn't really happening, you know. So they kept so much, but they kind of put in a wee bit of fantasy for what they would have liked the time to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. It almost, the TV show, the Hollywood TV show almost showed the 1940s as being a little bit more progressive than it probably was. There probably was gay people around at that time. There probably was some people who were accepting of it. But I would say that probably the vast majority of people in that post-war period were probably homophobic, and that homophobia was probably the norm at that time. And even though there may have been exceptions to that rule, and I'm not saying in any way that there weren't exceptions to that rule, the TV show was it. What I took away from the TV show was that it dealt with political correctness very well. The TV show, it was set in a different time period, so it could show the true nature of political incorrectness by setting itself in that time period, but at the same time, it had our contemporary values. So it did kind of both at the same time. It had the homophobia of that era with the kind of acceptance of our era kind of merged together to kind of show the true tragedy of the homophobia. We talked before about false narratives whenever we were talking about the Tiger King, and how false narratives aren't necessarily bad narratives. And I think that whenever I was watching Hollywood, I was reminded of that this may be not necessarily a false narrative, but certainly a politically correct narrative, and that it was good. It was a good politically correct narrative. It was because it did show us the tragedy of homophobia. And with Rock Hudson's story, there's obviously the whole sexual harassment thing, which is obviously important in this era as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it really brought to light just how much those big wigs do dictate what you do for where you're getting to be in the movie industry.
Not just the movie industry, though. In any creative industry where you need an amount of luck to succeed, any creative industry where you are at the beck and call of the bigwigs, the part of the punk rock appeal of indie artists is that they're not dependent on the big wigs to kind of succeed, whereas pop artists kind of are. You know, X Factor is completely dependent on Simon Cowell. But when it comes to Hollywood and being an actor, you have to get in there with the big wigs, with the Harvey Weinsteins essentially. You have to impress them, and that amount of power corrupts always. And I think that's what the Harvey Weinstein thing basically taught all of us, is that whenever you're in that position of power, that it will go to your head. You will become a megalomaniacal person, and it's part of the business. As much as I agree that Rock Hudson is possibly the most interesting story, by way of structure, it might be best to talk about Jack Castello first, and then kind of come into the kind of story in the same way as the audience comes into the story. Because Jack Castello, he was in a relationship, he had a dream, he was handsome, and he sold out. So by way of structure, I think that if we talk about Jack Castello first and then make our way down to come back to talk about Rock Hudson, because I think that's a better way to structure this. And as much as I agree that Rock Hudson has the most interesting story. So he was in the war. He married a young girl before he went off to fight in Italy. And obviously he had the hope and the dream of being an actor, went to Hollywood. But he got very, very lucky. I pursued a dream of being a rock star for a while. You know, I was in the music industry, and the sheer amount of luck that it takes. Jack was very fortunate. He was handsome. He could act, which was something. But that wasn't enough. He had to meet the right people at the right time and also completely sell out. He had to basically become a male prostitute. He was at kind of the beck and call of Ernie. So he literally sold his body in order to make the right contacts. And a lot of kids today who want to pursue creative endeavours don't realise the sheer amount of indignity that goes along with the pursuit of a creative career. And that was what Jack's story, and I suppose Rock's story as well, told in a very, very interesting way.
Yeah, I think with Jack's story, the fact that he sort of came along and his friend had been there pounding that ground every single day with everybody else, waiting to get his big break. And yes, he was getting bits and pieces here and there, but it took Jack to meet the right people, as you say. He met Ernie, he went and did his work with Ernie, and then he was with that woman, and it was her that actually brought him in. And had that encounter not happened, he wouldn't have made it big, he wouldn't have progressed so quickly, and potentially may never have got that big break, because just because he was attractive, just because he could act, he didn't even get a chance to get in the door to show them that he could act. So he just had that pretty face. But it is all about who you know sometimes that really gets you in that door quicker than others.
Also, Ernie's business introduced Jack to the writer of Meg, or Peg. So he got introduced to him through the prostitution ring, through not being willing to have gay sex as part of his job. So so the pure amount of nefariousness that kind of went around there in order that he could meet him. And then he met Ray Ainsley, who was the director, through meeting him. Yeah. And then through that, he had kind of all the contacts necessary in order to get the main part. So that is a lot of luck. That's a lottery win. So it's not just that he had the look, and he did have the look. It's not just that he had the talent, and he did have the talent. Without that lottery win as well, he would not have been anything. Yes, so that lottery win is important.
Yeah, I mean, how often do we say it, that it's not about what you know, it's who you know. And for Jack Castello, that was 100% the truth for him, because he would never have got that part. And it's the same for Woody Culler's daughter, who was initially cast for that role.
Claire.
He went, no, it's not for me. She was only getting that role because it was her daughter. So again, there's the whole, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It is that luck of who you're surrounded with.